Hello. In my previous video, I talked about how to factor trinomials when a is 1. If you haven't seen that video yet, I would encourage you to find it and watch that one first. This video is about factoring trinomials when a is not 1. A being the coefficient in front of the x squared. So in our example, we have 3x squared plus 16x plus 5. In this example, a would be 3, B would be 16, and C would be 5. Right, so why don't we look at an example? When A is not 1 and I have to factor a trinomial, I like to use the AC method. It's called the AC method because it uses A times C. Remember, A is our first coefficient, that's the 3, and C is our final constant, that's the 5. So A times C. When we multiply A times C, 3 times 5, we get 15. So now, just like factoring when a is 1, we needed two numbers multiplied to be c, added to be b. Well, now what we need is two numbers that multiply to be ac, which is 15, right? 3 times 5, 15, and add to be b, which is 16. So let's take a look. We have 1 and 15. 2 does not go into 15. 3 and 5. 4 does not go into 15. And then 5 would get us back to 3. Which of these will get us to 16? Well, we could add 3 and 5 all we wanted to, but we would never get more than 8. So 1 and 15 is the only way that this will work. Now, in the previous video, you could go straight to the parentheses and start breaking up your x's. That doesn't work when a is not 1. When a is something other than 1, you actually have to rewrite your first term. We have an extra step here. Rewrite your first term. And we are going to break up the middle term. Break up the middle term into 1x, the 1x coming from 1 being a factor of 15, and 15x, the 15 coming from the other factor that gave us a times c 15 and added to bb, right? So the two factors that multiplied to be ac and added to bb were 1 and 15. I'm splitting the middle term into those two factors, and if you add it back up, you get back to where you started. So we didn't change anything, and we do have to bring down that plus 5 too. That's also part of our expression there. So now what we can do, this is the extra step, we have to break it up into two groups. We've got group 1 and we've got group 2. So your first two terms and your second two terms. So group 1 and group 2. What we're going to do is we're going to take each GCF, greatest common factor, from each group. So in our first group, 3x squared plus x. What's the greatest thing that they have in common? What's their greatest common factor? Well, the answer is x. We could take an x out of both. 3x squared is 3 with two x's, right? So all that's left is 3x. And then when you take an x out of x, all you're left with is 1. Let's take a look at group 2. What's the biggest thing that group 2 has in common? Well, the answer would be a positive 5. If you take a 5 out from both, you're left with 3x to begin with, and plus 1, because 5 over 5 is just 1. Now this is really good. We want the same thing to be repeated like this, the 3x plus 1 to be the same in parentheses. What we do to get our answer, we rewrite the one that repeats itself. We rewrite the one that repeats itself. But we only rewrite it one time. We only rewrite it one time. Then what we do is we take what's in front. So like, for example, we have an x in front here, and we have a 5 in front here. And we give it its own set of parentheses. And our final answer for this problem then is 3x plus 1, x plus 5. All right, so let's try another one. Let's take a look at this. We're going to use the AC method again because we have a not being 1. So a times c, which is, of course, 15 times 14. 15 being a, first coefficient, 14 being c, our final constant. And what we're going to do when we multiply that is we're going to get 210. And if you need a calculator to multiply that, yeah, that's just fine. It's pretty big. All right, so we could list the factors of 210, 1 and 210, 2, 105, so on and so forth. That's going to take a while. just you need to keep in the back of your head, you need two numbers that multiply to be 210 and add to be b, right? Add to be b, which is 31. Add to be b, which is 31. So what are two things that multiply to be 210 and add to be 31? Well, we could divide 210 by 10, and what we would get is we would get 21 and 10. 10 and 21. And I know this because 210 has a 0 on the end. So if you divide it by 10, you just knock off the 0, and that's what it is. As it would so happen, 10 and 21 also add to be what? They add to be 31. So we found our factors. 10 and 21 multiply to be AC, which is 210, and they add to be B. That's exactly what we're looking for. So just like last time, we rewrite our first term, 15x squared. But we break our middle term up. We break it up, and it doesn't matter which one you put first, guys. It's okay if you put the 21x first or the 10x first. Just make sure you put both of them in. So I'm going to do the 21x first, plus the 10x, plus 14. All right, so we've split that middle term up. It's time to form our groups. Our first group is the first two terms. Excuse me, my pen snagged a little bit there. First two terms, second two terms, and we're going to name our groups. By the way, once you get used to this, you really don't have to write out the name of the groups every time. All right, so what's the biggest thing we can pull out of our first group? Our first group is 15x squared plus 21x. Well, obviously we can pull an x out, but is there anything else that they have in common? Is there anything that 15 and 21 have in common? And if you said 3, you are correct. 3 can come out of both 15 and 21. So if we take a 3x out of 15x squared, let's just take the 3 out of 15 first. What's 15 divided by 3? That would be 5. What's x squared divided by x? That would be x. So when we take a 3x out of 15x squared, we're left with 5x. What about 21x? 21 divided by 3 would be 7. And by the way, I'm keeping it plus because it's positive. Everything's still positive here, guys. And x divided by x is just 1. So we don't have to write that. All right. Next, 10 and 14. 10x and 14, excuse me. Is there anything in common with the 10x and 14? Well, certainly no x's because 14 has no x's. But we can take out a positive 2. And when we take out a positive 2, 10 over 2 would be 5. That x stays. 14 over 2 would be 7. And check it out. We got the same thing here as we did here. That means, just like last time, we rewrite the thing we got the same. And then we make a new parentheses for the things that are outside, keeping all the signs that we have. And that is our answer. Now, I know the question was coming. What happens when we have to deal with negatives? The examples I showed only dealt with positives. So let's work out an example with negatives. We're still going to do the AC method because A is not 1. A this time is 4. And C is negative 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these. We get 4 times negative 1, which becomes negative 4. And we have to find two numbers, which are factors of negative 4. They multiply to be negative 4, because that's AC. And they need to add to be B. B, of course, is negative 3. So we need to multiply to be negative 4 and add to be negative 3. Well, if we're just looking at regular 4, I'm going to do regular 4 off to the side. We have factors 1 and 4, 2 and 2. Now I already know 2 and 2 will never give me 3, no matter how I spin it. Or, excuse me, negative 3, no matter how I spin it. But 1 and 4, can I get a negative 3 from 1 and 4? Well, I could if I put a negative in front of one of them. Which one does it have to be? Well, it needs to be the greater one. It needs to be negative 4, because 4 minus 1 is positive 3, but 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So we need the bigger number. When B is negative, we need the bigger number to have the negative. When B is positive, we need the smaller number to have the negative. All right, so we found our factors. It's back to normal now. We just rewrite our first term, back to what we've been doing earlier. We split that middle term up into our factors. I'm going to write plus x, because that's the 1x. That comes from the 1, that is a factor of -4 and adds to be -3 with a -4. And then, of course, minus 4x. That's our other factor of -4 that ends up adding to be -3. And we do have to bring down that -1 as well. Then it's time to form our groups. Now notice something different. So group 1 is sort of the same method. With group 1, we are going to wind up factoring out an x. An x is what group 1 has in common, and we're left with 4x plus 1, right? Now look at group 2. Group 2 is pretty interesting because there's only one thing that group 2 has in common, and it's the sign. So what you can do here is you can pull out a -1. And when you pull out a -1, because it's -4x minus 1, both signs change. It's just like dividing both of them by a -1. So it becomes positive 4x plus 1 because we pulled the negative out from both in group 2. And as you can see, we got the same thing there, which is exactly what we wanted. So we have our answer as we rewrite the one that repeats itself one time, and then we rewrite the outside inside parentheses. And that is it for that. All right, let's do another example where not everything's positive. So just like normal, we got to use our AC method because A is not 1. A times C was 15 times 4, which happens to be 60, positive 60 this time. So now we need two numbers that multiply to be positive 60 and add to be -23. So let's list our factors of 60. We've got 1 and 60. We've got 2 and 30. We've got 3 and 20. We've got 4 and 15. We've got 5 and 12. We've got 6 and 10. 7 doesn't, 8 doesn't, 9 doesn't, and we end up back at 10. All right, so which combination of these will get us to a -23? Well, for starters, if we need to add to be negative and multiply to be positive, then the only way that can happen is positive numbers have to be either a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive. If I did -2 times 30, I would get a -60. That would not work. So to get a positive 60 but add to be a negative number, they have to both be negative. So when adding two of these factors together, how can I get a -23? Well, the only way is if I add a -3 and a -20. A -3 and a -20. And what winds up happening then is I can split my middle term just like last time. So we have 15x squared rewritten. Split that -23x into -3x and minus, that real quick, -3x minus 20x, and that's just, of course, that middle term being split up. And again, it doesn't matter. If you wanted to put the 20x first and then the 3x, that's fine too. And then we have to rewrite that plus 4. Now, let's say I went ahead and I made my groups. So we have group 1 and we have group 2. And let's see what we can pull out of group 1. So group 1, usually you can pull an x out, and we can't here because we have an x squared and an x, so we can pull an x out. What about 15 and -3? Well, 3 would be the greatest common factor there, leaving us with 5x minus 1. That's all well and good, but look at what would happen. What's the greatest common factor in group 2? Well, if I just went based on the greatest common factor, what I would get is I would get a 4 taken out. And when I take out a 4, I would wind up having a -5x plus 1. That's not good. We want these to be the same, but these are not the same, so this will not work. What can I do instead? Well, I can manipulate it by flipping the signs. How do I flip the signs? I take out a -4 instead of a +4. And when I take out a negative number, both signs change. This -20x divided by -4 becomes positive 5x because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. What about this 4? Well, when I divide this 4 by a negative 4, I end up getting a negative 1. And this is awesome because it means that now I have the same thing, which means that I can do what I did earlier, rewrite it once, and write the outside. And there we have our answer. All right, before I leave you, I want to return to all positives for just a moment because I want to warn you of something that may be tricky. Let's use the AC method to factor this, all right? We're going to find A times C, and what we get is 2 times 1, which is just 2. So what we need is factors of 2 that add to be B. What is B? B, of course, is 3, right here. So factors, oops, give me just a second to fix that, guys. There we go. So factors of 2 that add to be 3. Well, there's only 2 factors of 2, 1 and 2. So we can break up that middle term, and what we get is 2x squared plus 2x plus 1x plus 1. Again, those are just the factors that I took from A times C, and they added to be B. Now, we're going to make our groups. The first group isn't too bad, because with the first group, all we have to do is take out the GCF, which happens to be 2x, right? First group, we take out a 2x. So 2x, and we're left with x plus 1, right? Now, I've seen students before mess up with group 2. They think, oh, there's nothing we could take out, so let's put a 0 there. No. Technically, their greatest common factor is a positive 1. Everything is divisible by positive 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out a plus 1. It doesn't actually fundamentally change anything, but when we write our answer, we rewrite the ones that repeat, but we only rewrite it once, so x plus 1. And then we rewrite what's on the outside, and this is where the change happens. It's not just 2x, but it's 2x plus 1. All right, so if you found this video helpful, please like it, and we will have more content coming out shortly. Thank you very much.